Today, we're immersing ourselves in what is really one of the most serious and complex humanitarian crises happening right now,
Mm.
the sustained violence against Christian communities in northern Nigeria.
It's a heavy topic and one that definitely needs careful handling.
Absolutely. And the knowledge shortcut we're using today, it comes from a really comprehensive investigative roadmap. It's designed to analyze this exact situation, often referred to as faith under fire.
Hmm.
And this document, it isn't just, a simple report. It actually details the necessary framework, the facts, the stories, the context, everything you need to really grasp the profound gravity of this displacement and persecution.
It lays out the pieces you need to assemble for a true understanding.
Exactly. So our mission is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
We want to extract the core, the critical nuggets of knowledge that this multi-layered analysis reveals. We're not just ticking boxes. We're using its structure to guide you right to the essential insights.
Okay.
So let's dive straight in, starting with the sheer scale of the challenge.
Yeah, and that's the critical starting point, isn't it? When you're dealing with something of this magnitude, a crisis stretching over a decade involving massive human costs, you just can't rely on scattered news reports.
Right.
And this investigative roadmap, it acknowledges that. It says true understanding demands synthesizing the deeply personal trauma with the cold, hard structural analysis.
Okay.
And the very first thing this analysis framework demands is establishing that physical and statistical footprint of the crisis.
Yeah.
Because without that grounding, the suffering, it just remains abstract,
Right. Yeah, if you just read headlines, it can sound like generalized chaos, just sort of random violence.
Yeah.
But the analysis insists, no, we have to quantify this issue. So what does that quantification immediately tell us about the scale?
Well, it reveals concentration. That's what's fascinating here, how effectively the visualization tools, the maps and the statistics really reframe the narrative. The maps, they immediately define the geographical scope. They show that while, yes, the attacks affect the entire North, the concentration of violence is particularly acute in the Middle Belt region. That's where Muslim and Christian populations have historically overlapped.
Ah, okay, so it's not uniformly spread.
Not at all. And then the statistics provide the numerical shockwave. We move beyond vague terms like many people to actual numbers, like the hundreds of thousands displaced internally. People seeking refuge, often living in, makeshift camps or squatting with relatives.
We're talking about massive displacement then, people losing their homes, their churches, their entire livelihoods. What are the key metrics the source really focuses on to define this scale?
Well, beyond just the casualty counts, which are horrifying enough, obviously the analysis zooms in on institutional destruction.
Institutional destruction, like what?
Like, for example, statistics showing the number of churches destroyed or forced to close, the disruption of farming cycles, which leads directly to food insecurity, and the breakdown of basic infrastructure schools, clinics in those hardest hit areas.
Wow.
It really illustrates that the target isn't just individuals, but the very fabric of community life.
And for you, the listener, understanding this scale is just crucial because it transforms the topic from maybe a localized conflict in your mind into a regional humanitarian emergency. When you read that, say, over 70% of the documented attacks target specific village markets or community hubs, you start to realize the strategy seems to be about shattering the economic and social foundations of these groups.
Yeah.
It's not just momentary violence.
Exactly. It gives the crisis coordinates and maybe even a calculated motive.
The numbers are brutal and absolutely necessary, but you're right, they don't capture the whole story.
Yeah.
So once the analysis establishes that scale, the roadmap directs us to pivot, quite hard actually, towards the people themselves.
Yes.
And here's where the investigation gets, visceral, moving from that macro data to the micro experience.
Absolutely. The investigative roadmap insists on the absolute necessity of capturing firsthand testimonies. We need those specific human faces to contextualize the data points. A statistic about displacement suddenly becomes the story of a mother who walked for 3 days with her children, or the farmer who lost generations of land in a single afternoon.
It makes it real.
It does. And the testimonies, they detail not just the moments of attack, but the chronic aftermath, the psychological trauma, the difficulty accessing aid, the constant fear of return. It's ongoing.
But interestingly, the analysis framework doesn't just stop at documenting suffering. It specifically calls for including stories of survival, of faith, and community rebuilding. Now, this feels like the intellectual tension point of the document, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do you balance that grim reality with evidence of hope without sort of diminishing the trauma?
That is a profound question, and the analysis actually addresses it head on. The thinking is, if we only report on destruction, we risk reducing these communities to just passive victims of tragedy.
Okay, I see.
So, by focusing on resilience and recovery, on the stories of communities pooling incredibly scarce resources to reopen a school, maybe, or rebuilding a sanctuary, while under constant threat, we affirm their agency, their active role. Uh-huh.
And this is where that core theme of faith under fire truly emerges. Their faith, which often makes them targets in the first place, is simultaneously the mechanism for their endurance.
So it's a double-edged sword, in a way?
In a way, yes. It provides the social cohesion, the organizational structure, and, frankly, the moral commitment required to sustain recovery efforts, even when external support is minimal or non-existent.
So those stories of resilience, they aren't just like feel-good anecdotes slipped in. They are actual evidence of an active, ongoing struggle for survival.
Precisely.
They provide that essential emotional and social depth needed to balance the statistical devastation we talked about earlier. They prove the attacks have consequences, huge ones, but not total defeat.
Exactly. Not total defeat.
Okay, so now we've gathered the shocking facts of the scale, and we've looked at the heartbreaking yet also inspiring depth of the human experience. The third crucial dimension required by this analysis framework is synthesis and context.
Right, connecting the dots. Yeah, we need to connect that individual heartbreak to the complex geopolitics and the legal frameworks that are at play.
And this step mandates seeking out expert analysis. But again, the roadmap is specific about who those experts must be, primarily religious leaders and human rights advocates.
Okay, why those two specifically?
Well, they serve fundamentally different yet complementary functions in synthesizing all this information.
How so?
Think of it this way. The religious leaders, they give us the heartbeat of the community. They are immersed in the historical context of their congregations, the doctrinal underpinnings of why they endure, and the immediate psychological and pastoral needs right after an attack. They provide the internal why of the community's response and its capacity for endurance.
The inside perspective.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have the human rights advocates. They give us the X-ray, if you will, of the political and legal structure surrounding the crisis. They frame the attacks within international legal and ethical contexts. They're the ones assessing the response, or often the lack of response, from the government, from international bodies, from aid organizations.
That sounds like a really necessary but also highly complex synthesis to achieve. How do these external views actually help the listener connect those statistics of displacement we started with to the stories of trauma?
Well, they provide the necessary geopolitical and legal frameworks. For instance, the advocates help explain the complexities surrounding access to justice, why prosecution rates for these types of attacks might be incredibly low,
Right.
or how local conflicts over resources like land and water are sometimes manipulated or exacerbated by wider political tensions, creating this kind of perfect storm for sectarian violence.
Okay, so it has layers of understanding.
Layers, exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this critical analysis ensures we don't fall for overly simplistic narratives. It forces us, and you, the listener, to ask tough questions. Are these purely religious attacks? Or are economic and political forces maybe weaponizing existing sectarian fault lines?
I see.
The experts connect the dots between, say, that displaced farmer we heard about in the testimonies and the potential national policy failures, or the lack of effective state protection, which is part of the expert context.
The real genius, then, of this multi-source approach and why this investigative framework is so valuable is that it mandates the integration of all three dimensions. You can't just read the statistics and think you understand the crisis.
Not at all.
You have to see the face of the survival and understand the legal or political frameworks that might have failed them.
It's the whole package.
Right. So to sort of pull back and summarize the comprehensive knowledge required to really grasp faith under fire in northern Nigeria, this deep dive necessitates three key dimensions. First, establishing the scale. That's through the quantified data, the maps showing concentration, the statistics of institutional destruction.
The hard facts.
Second, grasping the humanity. That comes through the firsthand testimonies and those compelling, active stories of resilience and survival.
The personal impact.
And third, synthesizing all of that with essential context. And that's provided by the internal perspective of religious leaders combined with the external legal and political perspective of human rights advocates.
That layered approach, it ensures that you, as the informed listener, are not simply, swimming in an overwhelming flood of bad news. Instead, you're navigating a structured analysis that honors both the gravity of the data and the dignity of the human struggle.
So what does this all really mean? I think it means that comprehensive knowledge, true understanding, is always multi-source and multidimensional. To truly understand a major global crisis like this, you have to commit to seeing not just the numbers of the dead, but also the determination of the living.
Absolutely. And maybe for you, the listener, consider this final thought. In any conflict that's characterized by violence designed to erase a community's identity, whether it's through destroying homes or sanctuaries or cultural sites, the conscious act of documenting and prioritizing stories of enduring faith, and especially successful community rebuilding, well, that serves as more than just objective reporting.
How so?
It actually becomes a crucial affirming political act. It's a necessary step towards securing the long-term value and the future of that targeted population. In a way, the documentation itself is a declaration that they will not be erased, they will not be defeated.